a larger device over the iPhone mini. That's the only difference is that set it apart. It's the camera system, and that's, the LiDAR sensor.
What are we looking at in terms of a price tag on the 12 Max?
12 Max starts at $15.49 Canadian, and that's for the entry-level price, the capacity, which is 128 gigs.
Now, what if size does matter the other way? What if we're looking for something a little smaller in the mix? The iPhone 12 mini is quite small. Describe to us what it looks like.
It is definitely smaller, Dave. I mean, in your hand, it feels like you can wrap your entire fist around it. You can actually get that around the actual device itself. I'll go back to the overhead view, and I love comparing this to real-world objects. And you've got right next to it a passport, a Canadian passport. It's a little bit taller than a Canadian passport by maybe a quarter of an inch, but it's way thinner. It's almost half the width of a Canadian passport. In terms of screen size, you've got a 5.4-inch screen on this device, which is pretty small compared to the Max especially. The body is 5.18 inches high, 2.5 inches wide, but it's the same depth, so 0.29 inches deep, which means it's a really thin device in your hand, and it weighs only 4.7 ounces, which is pretty light in comparison to any other devices in the market these days.
Mark, you mentioned the camera for the 12 Pro Max. It was sort of big, what set it apart. So what are some of the features of the Mini that maybe sets it apart?
Well, I think the biggest thing that sets the Mini apart, obviously, is the size. The other things that set it apart are its lack of, obviously, certain things like that ultra-wide camera, the LiDAR sensor. I talk to a lot of people, Steven Scott and I talk about this a lot, and he's kind of aiming towards the Mini because when he's traveling, when you're out and about, you can just kind of slide it in your pocket, and because he uses the phone primarily with voiceover, he doesn't need the big screen size. He doesn't care, but he's kind of on the fence because of that LiDAR sensor. Now, the LiDAR sensor has a lot of promise, but today, it's not one of those things that's really going to change anything because there's not a lot of apps that are taking advantage of it. However, if you're one of those people that are using a phone for 2-3 years, it may be a good investment if now is the time for you to upgrade to go for something that does have the LiDAR sensor, because I can see where they're going down the road. I mean, just there's a people detection feature in the magnification side and the accessibility side of the LiDAR sensor that allows you to actually detect where people are in physical distance from you. So if you're trying to map a room and you're using voiceover in a headset, it can really help you describe the environment that's around you. And that's one of those things that the Mini is definitely lacking. Other than that, it's the telephoto lens. It's not there. And a smaller battery. So you're going to get 15 hours of video playback on the Mini versus 20 hours of video playback on the Max.
Yeah, you mentioned the portability side, and I've said it a couple times too, because we know pocket space is limited, especially for folks who might be blind or low vision, where the bus and pedestrian life is more their life than necessarily having like a cup holder or somewhere to throw your phone in the car, a dashboard cam. Pocket space matters. There's only so much room in your pockets to get stuff moving around throughout the course of the day. So definitely, I know even as I'm in the process of trying to figure out my new phone, there was one phone that I was looking at that was like 6.8 inches, and I was like, that's going to take up a lot of my pocket. I have to redecide what kind of wallet I'm carrying around, or get a wallet case, and then it's a whole new set of predicaments to figure out what cards make the cut in terms of day-to-day operation. Mark, what's the price tag for the iPhone 12 mini?
So it starts at $979. You can get a 64 gig model as the entry point, which is, depending how much stuff you store in the cloud, is not bad, all the way up to 512 gigs, which is interesting. The one thing I wanted to mention is accessory-wise on both these devices is they introduced a new MagSafe charger. And the really cool thing about that is with wireless charging, if you've ever used a device with wireless charging, getting it to that right point on the surface of a pad is actually not that easy. It's kind of a pain, especially if you're low vision and you can't really see where you're putting it, and you can't see on the display if it's charging. With the MagSafe, it automatically clicks to the back in the right position, and you know it's charging right away because it gives you that haptic feedback and also an audible tone when that happens, which is pretty cool.
Definitely like that one. So Mark, after you've given both of these phones a bit of a test drive, which one do you prefer?
I'm going to have to give it some more thought. Right now I'm leaning towards the Max because I can do some productivity stuff on that extra screen real estate that I can't necessarily do on the Mini. But I'm gonna play with these for a couple of weeks, and I'm going to kind of keep them both on me and see which one I gravitate towards more.
And what do you guys have planned for tomorrow night's episode of Double Tap TV?
This is a fun one. We're as more places are getting locked down again, we're talking about some of the tools that are making working from home a little bit easier, so that transition for people who have either, come home and gone back to work or still